You're listening to the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. I'm Allison Boyle, aka She Dreams of Alpine, and this is the show that's dedicated to all the adventurous spirits out there who have either been transformed by the outdoors or are interested in what it looks like to step into a new, adventurous, and courageous kind of identity in their life. It doesn't matter what your background is in the outdoors, what age you're starting at, or where you grew up. If you're curious about the outdoors and using adventure as a way to reinvent yourself, you're in the right place. I'll be sharing all kinds of personal adventure stories, lessons I've learned from the mountains, teaching what I know about the outdoors and leadership, and interviewing some amazing adventurous women all along the way. I've been coaching women on becoming safe, confident, and self-sufficient backpackers and leaders of their own adventurous lives since 2018, and I know exactly what big fears and self-doubts can pop up along the way. I have so much to share with you, so let's dive in. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. This is episode 13, and today I am very, very excited to introduce you to someone who has become such a special part of our Backpacking Badass community, and that is our client, Donna. Donna isn't just a Backpacking Badass alumni. She's also an ambassador in our community, which basically means that she helps support and guide other women in their outdoor journeys in our Backpacking Badass program, because she's been in there, I believe, since 2020 or something around then. So what's so inspiring about Donna is that even though she's been adventuring in the outdoors for over 25 years, she is always looking for new ways to grow and build her skills and empower others. And that's exactly why I wanted to invite her here on this podcast, because she has gotten really good at this over the years through some of our planning and adventure planning experiences and events that we've hosted. And I just wanted to kind of give you a behind the scenes look at her process as well as she uses some of our tools. So in this episode, we're going to dive into Donna's journey, how she first fell in love with backpacking, what brought her into our world through the Backpacking Badass program, and then how she has stepped into leadership both on and off the trail. We'll also talk about how she uses tools like our upcoming Your Adventure Era Challenge event to make a focused plan for her adventurous years and goals and all of those things. And she's going to be sharing a sneak peek at some of her 2025 adventure goals with you here on the podcast. So whether you're just starting out or you have been adventuring for years, I know that Donna's story is going to be such a great reminder of how the outdoors is a lifelong journey of learning, of growth, and of connection. So before we dive into Donna's story, I did want to let you know about a brand new free event called Your Adventure Era Challenge, and how that you can sign up today to join us in this 5-day challenge that we will be hosting on January 13th through 17th. So first off, you can go to shedreamsofalpine.com/challenge and find all of the information that you need about this brand new free event that we're hosting in January. But in summary, in this challenge, you're going to be taking some massive action to help make sure that 2025 is the year that you step into your adventure era, or you're going to be recommitting to your adventurous era and your adventurous identity, which means go on more hiking and backpacking adventures, meeting your adventure besties, and cultivating your adventure community. It means getting stronger than ever and feeling more strong in your body and on the trail. It means feeling confident in your skills every time that you go hiking, every time that you go backpacking. And ultimately, it means doing things that you never imagined were possible for you. Now, we have designed this new challenge as a way to give you momentum on your adventure goals in 2025, and it was created for both very beginners, newbies, beginners, and experienced hikers alike. So whether you're just starting out or you've been at this for a long time, I know you will find a lot of value out of this challenge. And we're going to talk here today with Donna, who has attended some of our past events, not the same challenge, but some of our past planning events, how much that has helped her grow as an adventurer as well. So what we're going to be covering in the Your Adventure Era Challenge is first of all, day one is going to be all about honing your courageous mindset so that fear and anxiety are not the things that are stopping you from getting on epic hiking and backpacking adventures. The second day of our challenge is going to be all about planning a year that is absolutely filled with adventure, because in your adventure era, we are going to be prioritizing getting outside and making that a priority in your life. On day 3, we're going to talk all about how to make adventure friends. I talk to so many of y'all where this is something that you want to work on, you want to build your community, and your dream hiking and backpacking community does exist, and I know how to help you find them. So that's what we're going to talk about on day 3. On day 4, we're going to talk all about how to feel strong for your dream hiking adventures, because for me, when I think about stepping into your adventure era, it's also about being healthy. And this could be like stepping into your adventure era could be one of the healthiest decisions that you make for yourself all year. And day 5 is going to be all about understanding what adventure skills and gaps that you have and you need to cultivate in 2025 so that you can make a plan to grow this year as a hiker and a backpacker and have what it takes to be truly self-sufficient and confident in yourself anytime that you head outdoors. Now, this is a virtual event. It's a 5-day challenge. It's going to be hosted online. We're going to have our calls hosted on Zoom for each of the 5 days of the challenge. I will be going live first to present the material, and then replays will follow. Again, that's January 13th through 17th that we're hosting the challenge. It's free and registration is officially open, and you can sign up for the challenge again at shedreamsofalpine.com/challenge. All right, now let's dive in to Donna's story. I'm so excited for y'all to meet her and see all the wonderful things that she can share with you guys. I'm so excited, so let's get started. Okay, welcome, Donna. I'm so happy to have you here with us on the Adventurous Reinvention podcast. You are officially our first student to join us on the podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. I just love that concept of adventurous reinvention.
Yes, same here. So, okay, I did a little introduction about you before we hopped on this call, but maybe before we dive into some of our other questions that we have prepared today, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got started in the outdoors and like how you got into backpacking in the first place. I would love to hear some more of that background.
Well, it's kind of funny. My family wasn't really that into the outdoors. I'm from Las Vegas, so it's kind of a different kind of. I live in Oregon now, so it's very different
Yeah.
landscapes. And I read a lot of books. So in my books, the heroines were always like running around in the woods or sitting under a tree, and I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. And when I was 12 or so, we would go to like the YMCA overnight camp for a
Yeah.
week or so in the summer. And one of the options was to go on like a little 3-day backpacking trip as part of like the older kids at camp. So I was really excited about that. And that was my first little adventure.
Introduction into the outdoors. It's very funny because it's actually, I don't know if you listened to the interview with Marie, but her like kind of introduction was also like summer camps as well. So that's funny that you both had that kind of experience.
That is funny.
So so your family wasn't super outdoorsy, but you kind of like started reading books and you were getting it in your mind that you were interested in that and you were doing you went to the summer camps and you went on your first trip. Was
Well, and
that, yeah, tell me more.
I was going to say that we would always like my family was really into taking like vacations. So like they
Yeah.
had their own adventure thing, and I had an aunt who was very committed to like getting all the cousins and like going out to Mount Charleston or Red Rock. So we did do fun things like that.
Okay,
But
cool.
just a little taste of things.
Yeah. So then, okay, I know when I met you, like you had been doing outdoorsy things like for a while before we met you. So kind of when did it turn from like being something you did a little bit to being something that became more of your identity? I'd be really curious to learn more about that.
Well, when I was in college, I went to college in Los Angeles, and for me, like Las Vegas to Los Angeles was like, wow, so much
Yeah.
nature. It's so
Oh,
lush.
yeah. I get
Um,
that.
and I had a really good friend, and he grew up in the area where I live now. And he was always raving about Oregon and we went on a road trip and he showed me some of the like amazing places that he always would go to. And I was like, I am moving here. Like, I really want to be around these like big, beautiful trees and
Yeah.
mountains and rivers. And it was just so that was about when I was like 18. I was just like,
Okay.
someday I'm going to move there because it's so pretty.
Yeah, I love that. And when did you move? When did you move to Oregon,
I
actually?
moved in 1994, so it's been 30 years when I
Okay.
was 20. So,
Oh, okay. So not short, like shortly after you went on
yeah,
that road trip then. And
yeah,
is that
yeah.
when you kind of started like, I'm sure Oregon kind of opens you up. I mean, LA has a lot to offer actually, because I had a similar experience. Like I went from Texas to and I lived in Bakersfield, California. And people are always like, "Oh, Bakersfield." But I was like, for me, it was like this introduction to the outdoors that I hadn't had in Texas. So I'm sure LA was kind of similar. It's like lots of hiking that is close in LA. Did you hike a lot in LA or did you get more into that when you moved out to Oregon?
Well, I didn't really hike a lot, but we would go up just like into the San Bernardino Mountains, and we'd go to Joshua Tree. We'd, take these
Yeah.
like road trip, Big Sur, like we'd kind of, I'd go branch out to like close-ish areas that, sounded cool.
Yeah. I love that. And okay, so you kind of alluded to your very first backpacking trip being with summer camp. Do you remember what that experience was like for you?
I do remember a few things because it was so long ago, and that was like my first trip, and my second trip was probably, not till like 8 years later.
Okay.
But that trip, what I remember is that the counselor tried to talk me out of going
Yeah.
because I had like a slight foot injury.
Okay.
And I was like, no, I'll be fine, like with my kids, like I
Yeah.
and and that we had started hiking, and I think it was around Big Bear, California, and we were
Okay.
going
Yeah.
up into somewhere, and about like an hour in, we get met by rangers, and they're like, "Sorry, there's a fire. You can't
Mm.
like, no, the forest is
Classic
closed."
California.
Right? My first fire pivot.
Yeah. You
um,
didn't know,
and
but you were learning skills.
right. And so they, the counselors just took us somewhere, and I just remember, so I remember that, and then I remember they had probably set up, someone had probably driven supplies out to cook food for us. And I
Yeah.
just remember seeing like mosquitoes like flying into the tomato sauce and actually being like kind of okay with like, oh, like surprisingly like, okay, we're gonna eat bugs.
That's great. I don't know if that would have been my reaction as a kid, but I love that
No,
that was
yeah,
yours.
that wasn't my experience as a kid either. But like I was just like, oh, but the tomato sauce is so big, the mosquito is so small.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so those were like the main points that like I remember. And then I just remember like, the counselors like sharing like different like strides to like make your
Mm,
walking smoother, or, I don't know. I remember it being fun, and I remember it being like very different from
yes.
anything I'd done before.
But it was like overall kind of a positive experience that made you
Oh yeah.
curious to do more. Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely fun. And like I said, it was so long ago, I don't really remember like
Right.
all of my, I'm like, wow, did we have tents, like sleeping bags?
I
Like
don't even remember. Yes.
I had a backpack and it wasn't that heavy, but I think we just had like our clothes and our snacks and probably our sleeping bag.
I mean, I would hope they'd probably want to give you a really positive first experience, especially if this was like a camp counseling sort of thing, like that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. Besides trying to talk me out of going.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, okay, you had that first experience. It's in the back of your mind. You moved to LA. Um, you said you had your probably next experience was like 8 years later. Was that something that you planned 8 years later? Or like, I haven't heard this story, so I'm really curious.
Yeah, that was my first summer after I moved to Oregon, and I
Yeah,
had time off from like, my job. So nobody else had time off, so I planned like just a solo road trip, backpacking trip. And I think I probably had like a, JC Penney's external frame, like backpack with like just a dome tent. And I was just
nice.
like, I'm going to go to the Olympic Peninsula and the Eagle Cap Wilderness, which are not near each other at all. But I was,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to just go there and then come back and then go there and then come back. And so I remember going in the Hoh rainforest,
Uh-huh.
just being like blown away by how beautiful it is and how lush and almost every single person that I encountered was just like so amazed that I was like hiking by myself and like, aren't I terrified? And aren't I? And I was like, I'm fine. I was kind of a little bit of a rebel. And, like I was just like, I'm not worried. Um,
I love that. Like, I feel like everyone has a little bit different personality around that when it comes to like going solo. And you know too, because you're in our community all the time. So there's different spectrums. There's people who are very terrified to go out on their own. And a lot of that is the messaging that we have like received as women as like it's not safe to go on your own. And we kind of internalize that. But then I find that there are some women that like kind of go the opposite spectrum where they're like, they don't want to like live into that and most of us don't but they just don't feel the fear in the exact same ways as some of us do. So I have one of my best friends. I've been wanting to do actually a podcast episode on this just because it's really interesting. I remember when I told her I was creating the Backpacking Badass program, she was like, well, I think I would just go do it. And I was just like, okay, there are different people in this world. There are the Karas, which is my best friend, and it sounds like you too, where you're just like, I'm just gonna go out there and try it. And then there's people like me who are like a little bit overthinkers and worriers and more anxious and tend to like have a lot more anxiety about those first steps and like what that looks like. But I think that is a really beautiful example of yeah, you kind of like living into the Kara identity. You don't know Kara, but that's just kind of like how I'm defining it.
Well, and at that point in my life, I had had a lot of experience with just doing my own thing and breaking away. And like,
Mm,
just because no one else wants to do what I want to do wasn't going to stop me
right.
from doing what I want to do. And I had gone on a bunch of camping trips and overnight, like not a bunch of backpacking trips, but I felt like the more you get used to like just sleeping outside and being out there, you just get more comfortable. And I had
Right.
done like a bunch of road trips across the country and by myself and
Which
just
helps so much. Yeah.
yeah, and I felt like confident in my ability to be responsive in a situation so that
Right.
I felt like I could trust myself. And funny enough, on the second part of that trip, when I was in the I was hiking down into the Snake River Canyon, and I got there late. And like I said, I was very different back then, and I hadn't done a bunch of research. There wasn't
Yeah.
really like the internet, and it's just kind of like spontaneous. I'm gonna wing
Yeah.
it. And I got to the trailhead kind of at sunset, and there was like a fire lookout, and I climbed up there, and no one was there. And I was like, oh, looks like there's a little fire over there, but it's probably fine. Like the trailhead's not closed or anything. And I started hiking down into the Snake River Canyon at sunset, like in the dark,
Yeah.
into what was must have just been a early start of a forest fire.
Mm.
And it was across the river. And as I was getting lower and lower in the dark, like I could see like the glowing embers across the
Oh,
canyon. And I
that's
started like
scary. Yeah.
filling up with smoke. And I was like, huh, this is like probably a good point to reassess, like, what am I doing?
Yeah,
And I
exactly.
was like, well, look at these trees. Like, these trees are huge and they're, like, they've been here, like they didn't burn down. And then I look closer and it's like, oh, actually they can handle being burned. Like, they have been
Mm.
burned. So I just turned around and walked back out.
So smart. Do you know if that area ended up getting burned
Yeah, it
after the
definitely
fact?
ended up getting closed. And like in the morning, the fire lookout person was
Yeah.
there, and I ended up just like, yeah, just sleeping in the parking lot, like
Mm.
near my car, because it was pretty far out there. And he was like, oh, good. Like,
You're out.
you're not down there. We were gonna, go look for you, because like this
Yeah.
whole area. And the next morning it was like, yeah, totally sucked in. You couldn't see
Wow.
anything. And
That's
I
a
just didn't
wild experience. Oh, like first experience to
really,
have.
right. And I just didn't have, the experience to know like that, how fast things change in those sort of situations. But also,
Right.
like I said, got to the point where I was like, well, now it is smoky where I am, and that also kind of just triggers that primal, like, oh, survival. Like, this is it.
Right.
And I knew I could just walk back up. So I did that.
Yeah.
And
But and to your point, kind of like what you mentioned earlier, it's like you had learned through some of your past solo experiences to trust your intuition, which is such a like important part of your skill sets in backpacking is like learning to trust yourself and the prior experiences that you have had. And I think that like a lot of us have lost touch with that side of like trusting our intuition and knowing that we could get ourselves like that we can make smart decisions in higher stress situations. Like it can be hard to like when we're thinking about the unknown and what if this happens and what if that happens, really at the end of the day, like a lot of us do know how to make these tough decisions. And especially after you have some more experience under your belt and you have some of those skill set under your belt, it's all about like trusting yourself. And which is what you did, it sounds like, in this
yeah.
experience. Yeah. Um, that's wild. That's a crazy story. Now I know we're going to talk probably later a little bit about navigating fires because I know we had talked about that being like an experience again that you had to deal with this year with some of your past adventures. And that's just kind of unfortunately a reality for a lot of us in the West is being really fire aware and kind of having that knowledge going into it. So it'll be interesting to see how you kind of have grown in that area from this first trip to now. But so, okay, it sounds like you've been in Oregon ever since you moved when you were 20. And what do you like? What is it like for you to be based in Oregon as like an adventurer? And what do you love about it the most?
Well, I'm right like in the middle of the Willamette Valley. And so that is an area that has a lot of access to a lot of different varying landscapes. Like, we're a couple hours from the mountains and like an hour from the coast, and we can
Yes.
go to a city if we want to, like there's the gorge, and there's even like the high desert. There's a lot of diversity of landscape, and then
Hmm.
also kind of it's it's not very populated. So even though
Yeah.
there's a lot of popular places, like California and Washington have like a much higher population density, so the areas kind of get a lot more use. And here I feel like, there's still a little bit of that wild feeling, and even the places that are busy. I mean, because there are a lot of people who were like me, like, oh, it's a great place to adventure. And
Right.
I just love the old growth trees. Like, I feel like that was a huge pull, and I love like swimming. I was kind of a water girl, so
Yeah.
lakes and rivers, and uh, the ocean's a little cold, but like,
Yeah. But it's so nice to go to like, you are always on backpacking trips near the ocean, which is like, I'm
yeah,
always jealous of.
yeah. And so that was my big draw. And then just I moved to Eugene, and so I hung out with like Earth First activists, and like they were taking me to like these beautiful places that were like proposed timber sales and, stuff like I spent a night like up in an old growth tree in like a little tree sit hammock because,
Wow.
like I
Yeah.
thought that would be a cool thing to do. And it really just have this like love of the land and
Yeah.
appreciation for it just being wild and free.
I love that. I feel like all of us end up having a place, like as we kind of enter into whatever our outdoor journey is, or like everybody's journey looks a little bit different, but we always have this place that feels a little bit more like home than other places. Kind of sounds like Oregon is that place for you. I know like the Eastern Sierras, like I have that same feeling. Anytime I go back there, I'm just like, wow, I just like love it here. I could spend all of my time here. Like I could never get tired of it. I love the old bristlecone trees. Like I love sometimes people come to the Eastern Sierras and they're like, it's so rocky. And I'm like, I love it. It's so rocky. It's so alpine. Like it just kind of, hits in a certain way. I love Oregon too. It's beautiful. I can see why you like it. It always like kind of gives me I don't know, fairy forest vibes whenever I'm over there because everything's so mossy and green and like wet. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and one of the things is that it's kind of um mild. Like so, well, the summers are getting hotter, but like it doesn't get super cold.
Yeah.
It doesn't get super hot. And like it's just kind of like you can always go out and adventure like all year round. There's always, you go to the coast, you go to the,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
different lower elevations. And then you also have the option to like go snowshoeing or cross country skiing up in the mountains.
Yeah. And you have some big peaks out there too. Like you have 14ers and you guys have desert too. Like you have a lot in Oregon too, just depending on where you are in the state.
Well, we don't have 14ers in Oregon. We
I
have
thought you
the
did.
no, the highest one is like Mount Hood, which is like
Oh,
almost
shoot. Maybe I
11.
just made the assumption that Hood was a 14er. So that's my bad.
Right, but I think they look taller because, the base is not, starting at 8,000 feet. It's
It's still a challenging peak. Like it's a mountaineering peak. You like want some technical skills. You want to like, especially
yeah,
if you're going to try to summit it, like it's definitely a challenge, like a 14er would be.
yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really think it is a very special place. So I know why you have stuck around there. I know why like Katie on our team has moved out there too, and she loves it. It's a beautiful area. Michael and I actually considered living in we when we were doing our travels, Bend, Oregon stood out to us as like one of the potential places we would like living. There we were kind of traveling for those 3 years, kind of scoping out as we were moving around in different places, like, oh, could we see ourselves living here? And Bend, Oregon definitely stood out to us as being like a really cool spot and hub to lots of different things. And yeah,
Yeah, I feel
I
like that is the most similar to like Colorado.
Yeah. Well, you know
So,
what's funny? I don't even really see myself as much of a Colorado girl, even though I'm here right now. That's more just circumstance. I mean, I am learning to love it. It has like so much to love. So Colorado people don't hate me. Like I definitely do like Colorado and I still have a lot to explore and I'm learning more about it. But California still ultimately has my heart. But where I'd want to live if we lived there is just like not feasible for us right now. So but Bend we were considering because it's a bit bigger of a town than some of the places in California where I'd want to live are like very small towns. But okay, let's transition a little bit. Before, so you were one of and when I introduced you at the beginning, I told them that you're now part of our Backpacking Badass program, and you're also one of our ambassadors inside of the program, helping other students, being a mentor, kind of sharing a lot of your experience. You actually had 25 years of experience before joining our program. And I remember having that conversation with you. I think it was 2020 when you joined, or do you remember what year you joined? Was it
I
like 2020
actually,
or 2021 or something?
I think I just my first encounter was I think 2022 Adventurous U adventure planning workshop
Okay.
because I felt like, oh, I don't need to learn how to backpack, but I was like, oh, planning. I want to talk with
Yes.
like a whole bunch of people who are really into planning. Oh, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And actually, I found you through Marie, because
Oh,
I had followed her for some back, her through hiking
yes. Yeah.
content, and I just thought I loved her stuff, and she just reposted like one of your um, reels about the event, and so I signed up for that.
Oh,
And
shout out to Marie.
right, I love it, and like I found that to be so helpful,
Yeah.
the adventure planning workshop, because even though I did a lot of stuff, like my planning, the extent of it was kind of like, I'm gonna do things this summer,
Yes. Yeah. Which is how a
and
lot of us do. It's not necessarily wrong, but you know, you
well,
can do
it
more if you have more of a focus and a plan and intention.
yeah, and a few years before that, my husband and I, like when we were turning 45, we came up with this idea we want to do 45 hikes because we always liked hiking. But
Yeah.
we'd go like once a month or, like we'd go backpacking like once or twice or maybe three times a year. And it was like we loved it. It was really our happy place, but we just didn't prioritize it.
Yeah.
So like a few years before I connected with your program, we had already made our own little like planning ritual,
Yeah.
where we would just basically make a so that was our first goal, was to do 45 hikes when we were 45, and we actually did like 60 hikes that year
Oh,
because
nice.
we really loved it. And then the next year we started our little like adventure wish list.
Yes.
So every year now we do that, where we get out all of our hiking books and like, just kind of places we've heard, things we've seen, places on the bucket list that like are nearby, and just kind of have this like master list so we can like rotate things in depending on the weather or closures
Right.
or on any given weekend. And then the adventure planning like really helped me like dial it in even more.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so 2022, that's when we connected. Yeah. Pan, it feels like I've known you forever. Like, I just feel like you've just been part of our world for so long. But I mean, 2022 is still a long time. I think that's 4 years now. So, okay, so that's kind of how you discovered us, our program. I remember having this conversation with you about like, because you had so much experience prior to joining the program with backpacking. In your own words, though, like what do you feel like was the reason you decided to join us in that backpacking program, even though you did have all this backpacking experience before joining us?
Well, I wanted to be able to like increase my, my skills. I wanted to be able to, increase my endurance and my stamina and my
Yeah.
abilities, for just what I was able to do. And I really knew that there was a lot of valuable skills I had never really formally learned, or, so there's a lot of ways that I could use newer technologies that, I hadn't really explored.
Right. I think I remember like navigation being one that you were wanting to work on. And I know like community, you had mentioned like having community was like super important to you too.
Yes, there was like navigation, safety, tech, and I wanted to learn more about that. And and I really just like got such a good feeling being with you and your team and the other women like in the adventure planning workshop. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like most of my friends, like they know that's my thing, but they don't really want to get into the nitty gritty of like what's so
Detailed
exciting about
planning. Yeah.
it. And they're like, sure, maybe I'll come along if you invite me, but like
Right.
they don't really, when I tell them about like I got the like permit lottery for the North Cascades, and I was
Oh,
like, oh my
yes, I
gosh,
remember
we
this.
have like the second time slot, like we can get like our dream trip. I really do feel like I won the lottery, and like nobody else could like relate to that feeling.
Yeah. I remember that post actually in our community. You were like, nobody that I know will appreciate this as much as y'all. And you posted it, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, yes, good job, Donna. Like, that is like sometimes winning the permit lottery is like something very, very much to be celebrated. It's a hard thing, especially for some of those, like the Cascades or like certain Mount Whitney or JMT or PCT like lotteries that you're, have throwing your ring in the hat for, especially lotteries, because it's like you may not get anything.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the cool things about the community is that like people are sharing like the same experiences or
Mm.
the same questions or the same fears or the same concerns. And since I've been in the community for a while now, I love it seeing people who are like brand new to backpacking and they know that they want to like get into it and then giving them the tools and just seeing their arc of like
Yes.
going to wishing they could do it and not feeling confident to like
Right.
look at my amazing epic adventures.
I
And
love that too so much. Yeah, like I think that's been one of the coolest things about I don't know if I like fully anticipated this when we created that program, but like getting to see people's evolution is just like so satisfying because, especially some of y'all that have been there for a while now, like where you were when you first joined and then like where you are now and what you're doing now, it's like crazy sometimes to think like, I remember when, not you in particular, but it's like thinking about somebody in the group. It's like, I remember when you didn't even know what like how to use a camping stove and now you're doing like a PCT through hike or something like that. It's crazy. I love that.
yeah, and I was going to say, I felt pretty confident before joining
Yeah.
the group, um but now I feel really confident and I know that like I can just pick anywhere,
Right.
like I want to go there and that I have everything that I need to like make that happen. Because
Yeah, and I feel like I've definitely seen you grow in that area too and also like your leadership skills and your mentorship skills have really grown too over the years. Do you feel that way as well about
I
yourself?
do. Yeah, I do. I feel like you know, as far as like leadership in the past, I was doing this to like, just kind of be by myself. Just
Yeah.
kind of like get away from people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like there's so many people who don't feel confident or don't feel that there's access or, there's a lot of barriers to making it happen that, are perceived and real.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so I feel like in my leadership is actually just sort of like encouraging people to,
Mm.
prioritize themselves and like, make a plan and like do the little actions leading up, like, that you can totally make it happen. Um,
And I feel like for you, something that I've observed is like one of your strongest leadership skills, like inside the community, is like leading by example. So, like, you show up to, even though you've been doing this for a long time, like, you'll still show up to like our planning events and you'll be in there and you're doing it and you're kind of sharing your behind the scenes and people can kind of like see themselves in you and like where they can evolve to. And I think it's really inspiring to kind of see different different of our ambassadors, different people from our community and like what their goals are and how do they make them happen and and like you getting to share something that has been so valuable. I know from like just being in the community as well as seeing you talk to people about how you made pivots and how like things came up and like how you handled it. That's like such valuable experience that people get to learn just by learning from you and your experiences.
well, and one thing I also really appreciate about the community is that it's not just the highlight reel. It is
Right.
the 50-50. It's the ups and the downs because,
Yeah.
it's tough sometimes. And like sometimes it's, there's unknown factors that, make things complicated or, like
Right.
health issues or, and sometimes just even the mindset piece or, there's just a lot of different things. It's not just all, peaks and sunsets and,
Yeah.
like
And marmots and all the things. Yeah, exactly. It's true. And it's so helpful to have like a community of people that can help normalize that experience and remind you that it's still worth it and to like keep going. Um, So we kind of alluded to some of this planning talk. Um, or we talked about a little bit, like how we're getting ready to host a brand new event called this year, we're calling it Your Adventure Era. And it's going to be a 5-day challenge. And in the past, we've called that the New Year Adventurous You. And it's been like a 2 series workshop. There's going to be elements of that still in this Your Adventure Era challenge. But basically, like a big part of that event is planning and creating a vision for like what you want your new year to look like when it comes to getting outside, your adventures, like even your adventurous identity, your growth areas, all of those things. And for me, like you've always been a big, like I just can't remember a time doing this event where you haven't been part of it. And I think that's because maybe we started it in 2021. And if you joined us in 2022, you've almost been at like all of them since we've done them in the past. So I'm really curious. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit before, but like, did you consider yourself a planner before you kind of like got into planning skills with backpacking and like adventurous trips and stuff like that?
I wasn't that much of a planner, but um, but I but I was the person in like my group, my friend group, initiating the plan and like
Yeah.
rounding people up to like show up to the plan if they wanted to come, coordinating the dates, like figuring out the um and so I did that to some extent, and now I feel like since it is a priority, like having a plan is important because otherwise, it's harder to motivate yourself to get out. It's decision fatigue. Like
Right.
and I used to do a lot of gardening, and the winter was the time when I would like surround myself with seed catalogs and just look at all the
Mm,
seeds and like what am I going to plant next year and how am I going to change it and so now like adventure planning are like my seed catalogs.
yeah.
I can't, I'm not out and about doing as much. So I can really have like the energy and excitement to like think about it in the winter. And also it really helps me like stay excited and happy during January. Like there's kind of like a little post
Little
holiday,
winter lull.
yeah, a little slump. And so that really gets me excited. And one of the things that I've learned that like is like the most important part of the process that I really picked up on after being in the program is that having a plan is super important, but not being attached to the plan
Yes.
even more important because so many like things come up. And so
Yeah.
knowing that you can make plans is a really great skill that sort of liberates you from having a plan because you'll
Right.
be able to like adjust if you need to.
Yeah, I love that. Not being attached to a plan is like super important. It ties in with everything. Like I think I had a conversation with one of our students in a coaching call yesterday about she had a lot of unknowns going into 2025 around health. And she was wondering how she should approach like goal setting when you have a lot of unknowns. And we talked about how like my personal belief is I think you should go in with the energy of like, I'm going to make the plans and set the goals and still be as excited, even if I'm navigating unknowns, because no matter what, whether it's health challenges or weather unknowns, permit unknowns, any of the unknowns that might come up in life, because life is full of unknowns, like we are going to have that regardless. And so setting the goal, setting the intention is going to get us further along to being close to hitting our goal, whether we hit it or not. And then we can talk about like what pivots look like and what, changes that we have to make. And you've had that experience a lot too. So it's like, I think a lot of people, when they get nervous about making plans, it depends on the kind of person they are. Cause sometimes people are like me, I love planning. Planning is fantastic. It lights me up. Like I get really nerdy about it. And then some people get really anxious about the idea of like pre-scheduling things. They think it sounds really rigid and like less spontaneous, but I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, but like I really think that it actually frees you up to be more spontaneous when you have like goals in mind. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I totally agree. And I think I had a similar call with you last
Yeah.
summer because I had some health issues and I
Yes.
was like, I'm training for this trip, but I don't know if it's going to happen. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know if, like if I can go the distance or as hard as I need, and you were just like, Donna, you're always ready. Like you've been
Yeah.
working on yourself or your goals or your training. Like you don't ever not do that. So like you're ready.
Yeah.
But I feel like with our master list, I explained it to one of my friends and like I could tell that she was just like, "Ugh, that sounds horrible." Like you plan out every weekend of your entire year. And I was like, "No, we just like have our wish list and then on any given weekend like we plug in like weather, like we crunch the weather versus how are we feeling? What are we
Yeah,
like
like your personal desire to do it. Like you can decide, like, you know what, I just want to stay in and knit
right.
or whatever it is that you want to do over the weekend and not go backpacking.
Right. Or if we have like one place on our list, but we're like, nah, we want to like go to this
Switch it
totally
up.
new place that's like not even on the list. Like, yeah, we do that too. Like it's not set in stone, but knowing that you're working towards some like for me, knowing that I have a fun adventure planned in August,
Right.
in January, like makes me excited. And
Yeah.
then I like to make like my littler trips, like low hanging fruit is kind of like
Yeah.
what I call them. They're like lower mileage, like a higher like wow factor to effort ratio.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
And climbing, we call that like five fun. Like you just climbing for fun.
yeah, exactly. Smiles, not miles.
It's not necessarily your big challenge. You're just going out to enjoy yourself. Yeah.
And like I feel like, like I've seen it in our group that sometimes people like put all their eggs in one basket
Mm.
about one particular trip. And
Yes.
it's like, well, you can do mini trip. Like it doesn't have to be solo. It doesn't have to be five
Right.
days. It doesn't have to be like in a national park. Like it can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
And so I feel like planning helps me like structure my time. Like we're able to like um figure out what weeks like my husband has like
What works best, yeah, for
yeah,
both
well,
your
like he can
schedules.
actually schedule his vacation in January. So then we
Yeah.
know like what times we're looking for. So like for the permits, it's all that's like the trickiest part is to like time it out. And then of course it's like, yeah, are the weather conditions going to be okay? So it's good to
Right.
make a plan and then also have backup um options if things don't go to plan. And you don't have to like cancel
Yeah.
your adventure. You get to just do a different adventure.
Or you could adapt it, like, as talking about like the health things, like sometimes I talk about like, if you still stick with your goal, right? And maybe you get to those dates and you're like, health wise, I'm not quite where I'm at to like do the full thing, but like maybe you could still go out there and you can do part of the thing, or you can car camp and make a different adventure out of it, but you will have been so much more prepared for that experience just because you started the process ahead of time and looking forward to it. And I think you'll be like so proud of yourself for doing whatever you could and adapting when it came up instead of counting yourself out before you even got there, right? Which is what we a lot of times do. We're like, oh, well, it's unknown, so maybe I should just not. And we kind of just stay stuck or kind of frozen a little bit. Um, there was something you said that I had a thought on and I lost it just by having my train of thought. But what I was thinking about is when I first started backpacking in California, I wanted to do it more than I had like the amount of friends that wanted to do it. And in California, you had to get permits for everything in advance. And so a conundrum I often found myself in is like it would be permit season, like that January, February, March timeframe where you had to like enter for different lotteries. And so I would have my wish list and I would just be grabbing permits of like groups of four, groups of three, groups of two. And I had no idea who was going to go with me because when I was doing that, I was maybe in my mid 20s and I don't know, my friends at the time weren't as all in on this as I was, and they wouldn't be willing to commit that far in advance. So I just knew, like, okay, well, I'm going to make this plan for myself. And if I get there and I can't rally a group, I can make the decision whether I want to do it solo or I just want to drop it. Like I can make that decision later, but at least like I've
Like
given
an
myself the
option.
chance. Yeah,
Yeah.
the option to have that experience. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Um okay. So, we talked a little bit about your approach for planning your adventure goals each year. Is there anything that you want to add to that? I know that you said you mentioned your husband and you kind of have like a running wish list. Can you kind of like what did you call that? You called it something particular.
Oh, I think I just called it our wish list, our
Your wish
adventure.
list?
Yeah.
What does that look like? I'm super curious. Is it like a PDF document or like a Excel sheet? What are you guys like?
Oh no, it's a little piece of loose leaf
Oh,
paper.
loose leaf paper. I love it. I love it.
We have them posted up in our gear room. So, I mean, I do have some spreadsheets, but mostly we just like we'll sit at the table or sometimes we'll like go on a little like romantic rendezvous at a cabin and we'll like spread
Ooh.
out all of our hiking books. And now we have like all our lists from previous years.
Mm.
So we don't always check everything off, obviously.
Yeah.
So a lot of things like we evaluate, like, do we still want to go there and put it on the list? But basically, we have one piece of paper, so that's maybe like 30 lines. And
Yeah.
then sometimes it goes over, spills over. So we don't want to do like more than that for because we know we'll add things that aren't on there and and we only have I mean, it might look like we're just out all the time, but it's really just like we're weekend wanderers, and then we have like a
Well,
few.
yeah. And you've prioritized it as like part of something that's important to your life. So it's something that you do a lot.
Yeah, so we'll put up it does seem like each year we get kind of like a new little like interest, like a new like John's really excited to like do the Tahoe Rim Trail this year and like
Oh, cool. Yeah.
so, like we things will show up on the list that are totally out of the blue. And then we have a lot of places that like we kind of make annual pilgrimages to because like we love them so much.
Yes, I
Um,
love that. I do that too. I do that with Moab now that I'm here in Colorado. I go there. Like that's like I live in Colorado. It's only 6 hours away. I'm gonna go to Moab like once or twice a year because I just love it there.
right. And yeah, my family still lives in Las Vegas. So we go like in the winter or early spring. And so we
Yeah.
always try to like get a fun little adventure in.
And there are cool things actually to do out there in Las Vegas. But if you weren't like, if your family wasn't particularly outdoorsy as a kid, it might have been like harder to discover that. But yeah, that's cool to kind of rediscover it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that is, yeah, we basically make the list, like the brainstorm dream list, and then kind of figure out what are the things that we need permits for and kind of like
Mm,
float them up to the top. And then yeah, so because doing like a giant list can mean you have to do like a ton of research.
right.
So we kind of try to like
Pare it down.
prioritize like the big rocks of
Yeah.
like what are the main trips and kind
What are
of
you most excited about first? Yeah. And then kind
yeah.
of like prioritizing.
And what's going to take like the biggest chunk of time or the biggest amount of planning or logistics.
Yeah.
So kind of like lean into that. So we spend a lot of time with their books and then we also like look at YouTube videos because like
Mm.
if you're getting a permit for like say the North Cascades, there's so many different trails and like
Options. Yeah.
for the permit process for that one you have to pick what campsite
Okay.
you're
Yeah.
going to stay at. And that's
Can I
like
talk about a pet peeve of mine with Colorado? Is that you have to do that. In California, you talk about your entry trail and where you're exiting, and that's all you have to know in advance. In Colorado, and it sounds like or like the Cascades, maybe, you have to like say what campgrounds you want to stay at in advance. And I'm just like, whoa, that's a lot of pre-planning. Like,
it is a lot of pre-planning, and I can see why when we're there because there are literally only four spots.
yeah.
Like, but and they've made them nice, and they're and they're private, and but it's tough. It's tough if you don't know that's what you have to do and you're walking
Right.
into it. And it is a barrier for some people. So
Yeah,
watching
totally.
YouTube videos of people who are like doing that exact same trail, you can see like actually get eyes on like, okay, this is camp, like that's
Mm,
and for me, obviously, one of the more important things is to not overestimate the amount of mileage if you
hmm.
have to like pick where you're going to stay, especially if you have like a beer can, if you're not used to carrying extra weight with
Right.
all of that. So,
And a lot of that kind of comes with experience, like you knowing like how much mileage and gain. But that is another thing. Like if you're having to pick your campsites in advance, you actually do kind of need to know like what's the mileage to that camp and like how much elevation gain, because that factors into your decision of, well, do I want to camp there or do I want to camp here where it's closer or something?
right, right. And last year I made like a crazy plan that was like, well, I think we, like I think we can do it. But I also know that with some places, they have you can adjust your plan once you're actually physically there, picking
Mm.
up your permit in person with the rangers, and they'll tell you like what's still available,
Oh, okay.
what trails are closed, or what,
Yeah.
like so that was a good experience. But so not being attached to the plan, but also like knowing like different methods of researching things like
Right.
is helpful.
Yeah, and for those of you who are like listening and you're already feeling overwhelmed by our permit discussion, definitely okay, I talked about the Your Adventure Era challenge. One of the things that you can do when you sign up, that's a free challenge, but we do have some like extra resources you can sign up after the fact for that include a workshop that we do called the Permit Planning Workshop. If you're brand new to all these things, definitely get that. It's going to be like it's only $35 just to add on some extra resources and planning resources that we do as part of this experience. But we talk all about permit stuff. So helping you demystify the permit overwhelm. And then it does get easier. Like even if it is complicated, it gets easier as you kind of learn the different systems. And sometimes you just make mistakes. Like when I first moved to Colorado, I wanted to get permits for what was it? The four pass loop. I was like, oh, cool. Like, I'm just going to grab permits for the four pass loop. And I just made the assumption that the permit process was the same as California. And I went in there and I was like, I want to enter here. And I put 4 days and I realized what I did was picked the same campsite for like 4 days instead of picking different camps. So I was like, oh, so literally I can't go anywhere. Like I can just stay at this one campsite. So I paid for that whole permit and then I had to like basically call it a wash because I did it wrong. But that happens too. And sometimes you have to learn the hard way, but it does get easier.
Yeah, and I feel like that sort of stuff, like I feel like having you guys, the team, like is really helpful because like it is confusing and they don't necessarily make it easy.
Mhm. Even
And
their maps are like a little bit confusing. You're like, wait, what zone is this? And what campground does it refer to? Like, why is this not more clear? And at this point in time in our lives, like with all the technology that exists, like, why is there not like a clickable map or something like you can like go into, see, and like have more details? It's just these
yeah,
big
totally.
paper confusing maps.
Yeah, it actually drives me crazy when you're supposed to like pick your destination and then they just have all the campgrounds in the entire park on the
Yes,
list, not the ones that you could actually walk to,
right,
all of
exactly.
them. So it is that, but that's most of our hikes are not that. So that's kind of why I like prioritize the ones that are going
Yeah,
to take the most fine tuning and then move on to like I said, the lower hanging fruit of like the fun recreational, type
right.
training hikes, training backpack trips and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. So, okay. I am really curious, like your planning thing that you do with your husband. Do you usually do, like, since you've joined this program and you started joining us in our like New Year Adventurous You events, do you usually do that before or after? that event? Or do you do that kind of like do you do the brainstorm? Because we walk you through the whole like planning brainstorming process. Do you kind of do that on your own? And then when you and your husband meet, do you kind of like bring it all together or what's that look like?
We usually do it together. It's basically our like it's like our holiday tradition. It's kind of
Yeah.
like how we
Oh,
wrap up.
like so over Christmas
Yeah.
time holiday. Yeah.
And so we kind of like wrap up the previous year and we kind of do a little reflection of like what we liked, what we didn't like, or like what
Yes.
was good, what wasn't good. And I always like to have at least one or two stretch goals that seem
Yeah.
like just a little bit out of reach, but like I feel
Me too.
hopeful, optimistic that I'll be able to make it happen.
Like it excites you, but you're like, I don't know. I don't know.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So we usually discuss it and then like he doesn't really have the option to actually like be online at the time, like when the permits are
Yeah.
available. So I have this whole list of like pre-approved, adventures. And so it's fine for me to just like go ahead and make the physical
Permits.
plans and stuff.
Cool.
And like I said, for the most part, we don't need permits for everything. We just have a
Right.
just it just happens to be sometimes the coolest places that you want to
Yeah.
go.
And that's always like a good way to approach it is like have a few things that maybe are a little bit more logistically complicated and then like other things that are like easier to plan and more on the fly. Yeah.
Yeah, and like last year we had this beautiful plan and I mapped it all out and I did the mileage and the loop and the Gaia, made my route and like about a month ahead there was a forest fire like 10 miles away and I was like
Mm,
10 miles away in June, like there's no way. Like
yeah.
they haven't closed it, but there's no
Yeah.
way we're going to be able to go there, nor would we want to,
Yeah.
because the fire would be closer than the exit out of the road.
Like
So
unless they got it out really quickly for whatever reason, but yeah, I know what you mean.
and so then I went and planned like a whole nother trip. Um, and then we had horrendous fires in Eastern Oregon. And so we're
Mm,
like, okay, we're not even going to worry about that. Like, we're just canceling that. And like, okay, what else? Like, what else can we do? Like, we have like almost 3 weeks off. So like, what's going to happen? And so, yeah, we ended up picking a trip in the Olympic National Park,
oh,
just like
nice.
just like a week ahead, because we're like not going to be fire here because it's like
Yeah.
not going to
Very wet.
very wet. And we were able to find a trail that didn't have any. Basically, you had to get a permit, but there was like 96 permits per camping spot, and I was like, so it's
Mm,
basically unlimited because there's
yeah.
no way 96 people were going to camp there.
Yeah.
But we made this whole route and it was like we didn't see anyone for like 72 hours on the weekend in the summer in a national park. Like we
That's
didn't see a
amazing.
single person. And I was like, that's crazy. And it was kind of a not very maintained trail. It was actually kind of grueling and intense, but it was
Yeah.
like we had a 3.5 mile day and we're like, why is this taking us the whole day? And why is it so hard? Like it wasn't even
That's
like high
crazy.
elevation. We're basically, like at 2,000 feet. So it wasn't
Was
like
this a trail that you had picked out based on some recommendation, or was it a random one that you kind of just found?
this was a random one that I found because it had availability
Oh, yeah.
and at like last minute. And some places you can just walk up and they'll give you, what they have available.
Right.
But Olympic National Park is not all of the reservations have to be done online.
Mm.
So I was like, well, let's just get something on the
That's
book.
still cool though. Like you still made, lemonade out of lemons, I feel like. And
Right. And
Olympic
looking
National Park is beautiful.
right. And looking back, like that was like 5 days out of our trip. And then we had like spent some time at the beach and we went to
Right.
the Sol Duck Hot Springs and we went to all these different other places, Hurricane Ridge, like we just made a whole little trip out of it. And then um and then with type 2 fun. It's not
Yeah.
quite, it's not maybe as that fun in the moment, but like looking back, it's kind of fun. Like,
Yeah.
oh, we did that. Like, yeah, we had to ford, almost waist deep river. That was the
Wow.
trail.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. That's cool though. I remember you navigating all those different fires. And I mean, like one upside too is like you did all those plans and then maybe like in the future you'll be able to go out to those places again. And I don't know if they got completely burned down, but hopefully there is some forest left of those areas.
Well, and a lot of times we'll cancel for a near-ish fire
Yeah.
just because like hiking in the smoke
Right.
condition isn't going to be healthy, or there's not going to be any views, or.
Right. And you make all those decisions. And also, like, sometimes you make the decision just not knowing exactly how it's going to turn out. And you'd rather go somewhere than like it be ruined when you get there or something like that. Sometimes those are the pivot calls that you're making. I know, like, so that was your 2024 goal was like that big trip that you had. And in the past, like I know a couple of your big kind of stretch goals were like in 2022 you wanted to do like a backpacking trip a month because I remember you went on one every single month. I think you did two in 1 month. Didn't you get 12 or did you have 11? I can't remember.
I think I ended up with 12, but they weren't all in each like calendar month.
Yeah, but almost though,
Right, almost,
actually.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, well, sometimes a goal doesn't make sense just to like be the goal. And I wasn't gonna
Right.
be like, I failed because I didn't
Right.
I made the goal. Like so it's like up
Yeah,
to
like I
me.
make the rules. And
Yeah.
also like you setting the goal, like even if you had only done 8 or 7 backpacking trips, like for sometimes setting the goal is the thing that actually makes you do more than if you had just been like, and the stretch goals too will like push us to go even further than we might have considered in the first place. It's kind of like in the episode where I talked about like my rock climbing goal for 2024. I talk about how like I haven't necessarily like checked off all the boxes of that goal of like what my big impossible goal was with that. But there was like so much growth in pursuing of the goal that I'm really proud of. And I don't think I would have gotten to if I hadn't set like kind of that bigger, this is what I want to achieve goal kind of thing.
Right. And you don't feel like, oh, I failed. You feel
No,
like,
I don't
oh, I
feel
did
that way at
so
all. I'm like,
much.
oh yeah, let's go. Like I'm super stoked. Yeah, to keep it up.
Right. And it's still on the, like, and it's still on the list. Like it's still something to
Yes.
strive for.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel, oh,
oh, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I feel that way because, and maybe you were going to say this too, like in 2023, our big stretch goal was to hike the Oregon section of the PCT
Right.
and totally like planned all of that out and all the resupplies and the daily mileage and the logistics and like
Right.
all that stuff.
Through hikes are so like planning intensive. Yeah.
Right. And even to the point of like, mailing out like all of our food for the
Yes.
whole time. And then a couple days into it, like my husband had a bulging disc. So
Yeah.
like we went like 25 miles out of 450.
Right.
But like that was just something we needed to take care of. And then, I had the opportunity because I had the time off, like to go on more solo adventures and adventures with my friends. And I could have continued with the thing, but our original plan by myself, but I felt like, I wanted to be supportive and help him like get around
Right.
and go to
Yeah.
doctor's appointments and things. And and it was then by the time he was able to like not be in pain and to stand and walk a little bit, we went on an epic like road trip to like pick up all our resupply boxes, and then we were
Yeah.
like handing out, doing trail magic for all the PCT hikers that were there. So we brought
Yeah.
like cold drinks and like gave away like a bunch of our, you know 10 million baggies of like electrolyte powder and like people
Yes.
were really excited that we had things to share, and we got to still have like a trail adjacent experience and
Right.
go to all these beautiful places that the pickup places were pretty awesome.
Yeah. I think that's like, I think when anytime you embark on like a through hike in particular, something that big and that long, like you have to go in knowing that probably things won't go according to plan. And that has been my experience with through hikes. Like we also didn't get to finish ours because of fires. And like you had health, you never know what's going to come up for a through hike. And so I think a big piece of that is like mourning the loss of that experience is I think important, which we talked about, like you and I talked about how like, yeah, it feels like a little bit sad to like not have done all that work and not having to got to go on it. But then making like, okay, like how can I make the best of this? And where did I grow from pursuing this goal and like going after it anyways? Um, do you ever see yourself going back and trying to do the organ sections again?
I do. And we still have little, pieces that we've done. So like we're always still working on
Yeah,
like,
like the section hiking it or
yeah,
something.
adding
Yeah.
little links. We haven't like recommitted to like doing the whole thing again, but that's
Yeah.
always sort of like our like backup plan in our mind of like, okay, well, if we don't get the Wonderland Trail or we don't
Yeah.
get like any of our permits for the like time when we have a bunch off, let's just start where we left off and keep heading north. And someday I still do want to do like the whole PCT. I don't know, like I don't think you can see it, but right here in our kitchen,
You got the map?
I have a huge map. We got it laminated and we were going to get it framed, but it was like too expensive.
Yeah.
But, like that's definitely something that is, would be like a totally fun, valuable, and growth experience.
Really cool, unique experience. Like I totally agree. Yeah.
And even if, like even if we just end up doing it in various sections over, you know, various years, that's also legit, like that's still a
Right.
huge
Hike your own
accomplishment.
hike, whatever it is that it's like lighting you up, like forever, whatever reason. I feel like yeah, I don't know. I feel like for me, like the only reason to like take 6 months off and to like do a PCT, this is for me personally. I think there's like everyone has their own reasons of like why a through hike entices them. And I think for me it would be like the people that you meet. Like that just kind of excites me on like the interactions that, and I'm not, it's kind of funny because I'm sort of introverted, but I don't know, it kind of seems exciting about like the people that you get to interact with, become friends with, strangers that you eventually make connections with that you never, like, you just don't know who you're going to meet. He's going to end up being like somebody that like transforms your life or something like that.
Right. I feel like that way too, but I didn't always feel like that. Like I'm like, oh, I'm not like doing that to like for like socializing or like I
Yeah.
don't. But then it's like, oh, but all the times when we've actually like met people on the trail and like there was when we were in the North Cascades, there was like a group of women in their 60s and they were there when we picked up our permit and they were at like almost every spot along the way that we camped.
Yes.
And we, they left super early in the morning, so we like didn't really see them. But like every night at the Bear Box, we were catch up and chat and talk about our day and
Yeah.
learn about each other's lives, and it's like super inspiring and like
Yeah.
really fun.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, let's look ahead a little bit to 2025 as we are kind of like winding down, wrapping up. I'm really curious what's on the horizon for you for 2025? Like, do you have what's like kind of like standing out for you on your bucket list for 2025, if you don't mind sharing a little bit?
Well, I shared that the Tahoe Rim Trail
Oh, yes. Yeah.
kind of caught our attention. Last year, we were really excited about the Wonderland Trail, and we did not get a lottery spot
Mm.
to. So Wonderland Trail is on the list.
Yeah.
And then the Timberline Trail is a smaller hike, but that just goes around Mount Hood.
Yeah. I
And
have heard of that one.
and the Three Sisters Loop, which is like a 50-mile trail around the Three Sisters, which is a beautiful
Yeah.
section. And I think I told you we were talking about I was in the spring going to the Southwest. So we actually thought about hiking in Death Valley because my husband's never been there and
Yeah.
pretty wild. And then obviously the Oregon PCT section, um, some part of that section could also be like a bigger
On your
route. So,
list.
and the North Cascades, because we just love it, and we felt a little sad that we got kicked out of our awesome spot last year.
Yes, yeah.
But
That's
it's
awesome. So lots of backpacking again this year.
lots of backpacking. Yeah, yeah. We did get stand-up paddle boards,
Oh,
so
nice.
we'll still be like having our, alternate weekends of lake camping or, just visiting
Yeah.
where we
Do you
can.
feel like there's any like particular areas of growth you're looking to grow at, or is this just like a year of like, I just want to go on some of these amazing adventures?
Well, every year I still feel like I want to like, make more improvements in my endurance and stamina and distance. So I feel like that's still there. Like I loved it. You had the adventure bingo card.
Oh, yeah.
So I made one, and I wasn't very strategic about placing them, and I also
No,
didn't put
neither was I. I'm gonna rethink that this year.
and I also didn't put enough like low hanging fruit. That's still like an accomplishment. So like
Yeah.
some of my things were like, okay. So I maybe got like half of them, but one of them was a 20-mile day. So like
Oh, nice.
a
Yeah.
20-mile day. I've never done that. And like as a aspiring through hiker, like you should have done 120-mile days already.
Mm.
But
120-mile days. Oh, you mean 100 comma 20-mile days.
yeah.
Oh, I was like 120-mile days, Donna. That's a lot.
But so 20-mile day is on there, and then also it's mostly just getting out and spending more time doing it and
Yeah.
feeling strong.
Yeah.
Because I was just training and training and training. I'm like, why am I not improving? Like I feel like
Yeah.
I should be better. This shouldn't be as hard. And I found out like I had like extremely low iron, and
Right.
like improving my iron now, like my husband's like, I can't keep up with you now. Like
Ah, yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, oxygen in my blood. It's helpful. So
Right. Yeah.
exercise.
Sometimes when those things, we do have to like dig deeper. Like maybe this isn't just like a training issue. Like maybe there's something that else, some other way I need to like support my body and like achieving this goal that I have. And depending on whatever phase of life that we're in, too, especially as women and as
Right.
our hormones change, as like in different parts of our aging and like getting older and stuff like that. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
actually I was talking to my husband about that. I was like, you know what? The JMT, because like that's like a bucket list on our,
Right.
but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna wait till post menopause because
Yeah.
I do not want to deal with like 2 weeks of bleeding and like
Mm.
going over these crazy elevation thing.
Yep.
I'm just gonna wait. Hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, totally.
But anyway, so yeah, so keeping it in the not exactly the comfort zone, but like just expanding that
Expanding it.
comfort zone every year is kind of what I'm working on.
Yeah, I love that. I'll be excited to see kind of like what ends up shaking out for you and what permits you get. I think since we're getting kind of like a little bit over our hour, I want to jump into some fun rapid fire questions with you, if that's okay. And then we'll do some closing thoughts.
Sure.
So, okay, let the people know what is your go-to trail snack, Donna?
I love the Pro Bar meal bars because they are like super yummy, and then
Mm,
they are like very calorie dense for like what
nice.
they are. And then Epic meat strips. They have like these they're
They're
really
like
good.
beef jerky sort of sticks, right?
Yeah, they're like beef jerky, but they're better.
Yeah. I actually don't think I've never had the pro meal bars, but I do think I have had one of the Epic sticks a long time ago and I did really like them. And protein is really good for your body on the trail to
Yeah.
like repair your muscles and keep going. Okay, if you could hike anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be?
Tomorrow, if I was just heading out tomorrow, I think
Let's pretend you're prepared with all the things. This is not like yeah, you don't have to be stressed. Like you have it
right, the
already.
Andes. I love the idea of going some of the South American mountains.
Yes.
Like they're so awesome, and
Have
also
you
like
been before?
no, no, not at all. But
So bucket list area for you. I haven't either. So for me as well. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay. What is your favorite piece of gear that you can't live without?
I I really really love my Thermarest Vesper quilt.
Okay,
Uh,
nice. Yeah.
but I probably could live without it and have some other kind of sleeping bag, but I just really, really love it. But one of the things that has become so integral to my even day hiking is I have this little 1/8 inch thick Gossamer Gear little pad. So I
Mm,
so I can use it to like do stretching, but it also accordions up, so it's good for just a sit pad or kneeling, and it can
nice.
also be an extra layer of protection for like your inflatable pad
Right.
for warmth. I've even worn it as a sarong kind of thing. I wrapped it
Oh,
around because it was freezing and I didn't expect it to be so cold. So
yeah. That's cool. I feel like I haven't seen a picture of that. You'll have to share that
yeah,
in
it's
the group.
always
It
sort of
must
a
be like a little bit thinner than like a phone pad, is what it sounds
yeah,
like.
it is a foam pad and it's really thin and it's like 2 ounces or something. Like it's
Hmm.
ridiculously light and it's just really versatile. So you
Yeah.
always have like a dry spot to sit on or you can
Yeah, I've
stretch.
started really liking that too. Like I started, usually when it was like I would only bring two pads when it was like more serious colder weather. And I was like, well, if my inflatable pops, like I need to have something to insulate me. But now, like as I've gotten older, I'm like, I'm always bringing at least a half foam pad with me because it's nice to sit on, to relax on, and like not have to sit on the ground or something. Like I love it. And then also it's backup, if
Right. So
other
you don't
pad.
die.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, okay, what is your dream through hike?
Really the PCT, like I really feel like I'm gonna do that
Yeah,
sometime.
I see you doing that.
Me too.
If you could invite anyone, dead or alive, to join you on a backpacking trip, who would it be?
Um, I think it would be my dad. He is not
Aw,
alive and he wasn't
yeah.
really into backpacking, but
Mm,
I would love to be able to like share that
share them.
with him because it's such a integral part of like who I am and
Yeah.
what I'm all about. And I wasn't really as much into that before. And you know, I think that would be a really cool experience if I
Yeah, I
could.
feel that. I took my dad on like his very first like desert camping trip this past we just car it was just car camping and he brought his RV, but I was like that's special because like I feel like it's hard to convince my family to do outdoorsy things sometimes, so
Right.
like I totally understand. Okay, last last quick rapid fire question. What's the funniest or most unexpected thing that's ever happened to you on the trail?
Um, so this past trip, the grueling, unpopulated Olympic National Park Trail, they had like composting toilets at all of the camp spots to just sort of
Yeah.
minimize the impact. But this particular spot had yellow jackets in
Oh my gosh.
the composting toilet. So we did not
Sounds
use
like
it,
my worst nightmare.
right? Oh
Yes.
yeah. So but like not just like there were some in there, there was like a hole in the ground of like, yellow jackets living there. And I was like, oh my gosh, we can't use it. We'll find somewhere today. But then I was like, in the morning, it'll be fine because they'll be like asleep because it'll be
Yeah.
cooler. And so I went to use it and ugh, I had to like run out. And I was like, I'll do my wiping out there because I'm like, oh my
So
God.
you like got through it and then they started like
And
getting
then they
awake
started
or
coming
something.
out, and I was
They
like,
were
oh
like,
my
"Who's
God.
disturbing my kingdom?"
It was really funny. And I was like, oh no, I guess I will have a poop story for the
Oh my gosh,
for
that's
the
great.
podcast. It was
You
pretty
are a brave
funny.
woman.
It was pretty funny, and I probably, yeah, I should have not used it because I already knew that there was a potential, but I'm like, it's barely
But
light out.
I mean, that makes sense. I would have had that. I would have had like similar logic. Like in the morning, it would have been like too cold and they probably wouldn't have come out.
Right.
But that sounds terrifying also. So,
And obviously they weren't out when I decided it would be okay to use it. And then they're just like, you woke us up.
yes.
It was too funny. It was funny in
Do
retrospect.
you know if you're allergic to bees or not?
I am not allergic. I've gotten stung before, but after we took our wilderness first aid class, I just
Yeah.
started carrying an EpiPen.
Oh, nice.
So
Yeah.
that's part of my first aid little
Oh, cool. I think
kit.
that's so smart. Actually, that's something like I surprisingly, well, I mean, we have one for client trips, but like personally, I haven't started carrying one. And I need to because Michael is allergic to shrimp, which is not something you encounter on the trail necessarily, but like sometimes the backpacking meals will like have fish or shellfish product in it. And I'm like, I probably should have one of these.
Yeah. It was
So
like
yeah.
$8 for two
Oh, wow,
with
that's
my
great.
insurance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I need to look into. And I just did my wilderness first responder recertification like last month. And they were telling us about a new product that is on the market that is a nose spray
Oh,
version of an EpiPen kind of situation that like the FDA just approved. So I'm going to be really interested if that like ends up proving to be really useful because I feel like it's less intimidating to people to like have a nose spray versus like needles that you like kind of
right,
shove into your thigh in an emergency. But
right.
kind of cool, like that technology is progressing. Okay, so let's end with some closing thoughts. I would love to know like what advice would you give to somebody that wants to spend more time outdoors or do more backpacking this year?
Well, one thing I would say is that if it's a priority to you, like make it a priority, like put it on your list, put
Right.
it, schedule it in, but also just like start by just going on more walks from your doorstep, like going
Yeah.
outside to start walking every day, adding in a weekend hike here and there. Make a goal to go on a certain amount of hikes or go car camping and get used to like being out there and then
Yes.
pick a trail. Like, just like pick a trail and do some research. I'm a huge fan of YouTube for like seeing other people's trail videos.
Right. Yeah. There's so
And
many resources available to us.
and I was gonna say and grab one of your free adventure list,
Oh,
ultimate
yeah.
list guides, because you have like pretty much laid out what everybody, would need for their
Oh, yeah, like
year.
backpacking trip lists, all of those things. You guys can find those linked on the website. But no, that's great advice. Like, I mean, it sounds so simple. Like, if you want it to be something that's part of your life, like make it a priority, but you have to like be for real with yourself. You're like, okay, like sometimes that means like setting boundaries or like not setting boundaries, but like telling people in your life, like, hey, I want this to be a priority. I would like to do this like once a month, or I'd like to start having more time for hiking and things that are important to me and like really being intentional, which is where I think a lot of that planning can be really helpful in setting the intention ahead of time.
Yeah, and we kind of discovered like all these trails in our area just by going to the library, and our
Yeah.
library happens to have like a ton of local resources, local authors, books, and all sorts of things, everything, like really a lot of different
Yeah,
things.
that's a really smart resource actually. Like the library has so many like guidebook stuff, things that you wouldn't even think of looking up at the library for your local areas. So yeah, that's super useful. Okay, and then finally, since you are one of our Backpacking Badass alumni, it would be so amazing to get your kind of like a summary of your experience with the Backpacking Badass program, like a short sentence and like what it's been like for you.
Well, what I love is just like it's like a community of like mutual empowerment, and we get to, and we're all so much stronger and more capable than we know or give ourselves credit for.
Totally.
And yeah, and I just love like sharing the enthusiasm, just really kind of helps build momentum for
Momentum and
everyone.
action. Yeah. And And if you were to join the Backpacking Badass community, or if you already are one of our Backpacking Badass students, like if you're in the community, you get to interact with people like Donna and learn so much from her valuable experience. One of the things I like to encourage our students to do when they're inside of the group is like do searches. So if you're looking for cool Oregon things, like go in our group and type in, Oregon, or look up Donna. Like she has shared a lot of her past trips too, for people thinking about like inspiration for their future trips. So that is a valuable resource. So, Donna, we are over our hour. I don't want to like keep you any longer, but I wanted to just say thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing a little bit about your experience, your background with us, your planning techniques, and like some of your goals for us for 2025. How could people connect with you if they wanted to connect with you?
They could find me over on Instagram at Donna on the Trail.
Donna on the Trail. I will also link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, and I mean, I have a Facebook too, but it's, you know, just my name, Donna Pezzullo.
Yeah.
And yeah, both, yeah, those are public uh, profiles. So I'm happy to chat with new friends.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Donna, and being here with us on the podcast. And we will catch up with you soon. I hope to see you at our planning stuff that's coming up in January.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Allison.
All right. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Bye. Hey, I wanted to thank you real quick for tuning into the show and listening all the way to the end. If you love this episode and you want deeper support in becoming a safe, confident, and self-sufficient hiker and backpacker, then head over to shedreamsofalpine.com/waitlist to learn more about our Backpacking Badass coaching program, where I teach you absolutely everything you need to know to be self-reliant on the trails and stop waiting around on others for the adventure invite. So I'd love to help you more in your journey of stepping into your adventurous identity, and that program is the absolute best place for us to start working together. So again, that's shedreamsofalpine.com/waitlist, and you can learn all about it there. So that's it for today, folks. I hope you get to spend some time outside this week, and I'll be back very soon with a brand new episode. Bye.